I'm standing in front of the 1825 plaque commemorating the completion of the Erie Canal.
The plaque reads, 362 miles in length, was commenced the 4th of July, 1817, and completed in the year 1825, at an expense of about $7 million, and was constructed exclusively by the citizens of the state of New York.
The decade of the 1820s is often referred to as the beginning of the transportation revolution. Prior to this time, the primary way of traversing across the United States was either going along the coast in large ships or using small boats like the one shown here to go up and down the rivers and streams. With the building or the construction of the Erie Canal, the cities of Utica, Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo became major cities or metropolises in the state. The boats could travel from Albany to Buffalo by being pulled along the side of the banks where the locks were located by mule teams. These flatbeds were used to not only transport people but to transport cargo to other parts of the state. Ironically, in opening up the western part of the state to commerce, we also opened up the western part of the state to slavery. New York State is the largest state with a slave population north of the Mason-Dixon line. Therefore, in the 1840s and 50s, New York also became a hotbed of abolitionist activity. Going west from Albany, this region was referred to as the Burned Over District. That is because religious groups fought vehemently against the institution of slavery.
Starting in 1825, when the Erie Canal was completed, a large number of abolitionists moved to the western part of New York State and began some religious revival meetings. These meetings were to attract new followers to groups that had just recently formed in this area of the state, such as the Oneida community, the Millerites, and including the Mormons, and eventually the Shakers. All of these New York State groups had a number of things in common. They were in favor of temperance. They were against any type of slavery. They wanted prison reform, and all of them were extremely religious. Later on in the 19th century, some very famous abolitionists would settle in these parts of New York State. Frederick Douglass eventually lived in Rochester, publishing a newspaper called the North Star. Harriet Tubman moved to Auburn, and John Brown is buried in Lake Placid.
Along with the Erie Canal, other transportation networks in this period of time were developed as well. Turnpikes, roads, and railroads, for example, were created.
Starting in 1807, Robert Fulton's Clermont, a steamboat, began to travel up and down the Hudson River. People eventually wanted to use this form of transportation to transport not only goods, but people. An eventual Supreme Court case, which is called Gibbons versus Ogden, was a result of a dispute between two parties who wanted to control the Hudson River, and of course, all of the steamboats that were on it. One group claiming that Congress had issued them a federal license, another group claiming the state of New York had issued them a license. When these two groups eventually had their case heard by the Supreme Court determined that any river flowing between two states, in this case New York and New Jersey, was federal jurisdiction. According to the Constitution, in Article 1, Section 8, interstate commerce only is a delegated power to the Congress of the United States. This case, then, made New York famous, if for no other reason that it established the federal supremacy over states in the United States. Other methods of transportation, such as roadways, were constructed beginning in 1833 with the Cumberland Road. Canals, as we've mentioned, were also completed in this period of time, and besides the Erie Canal, over 3,000 miles of canal were in use by 1840. The last part of the transportation revolution were the railroads. Some early lines involved a line going from Albany to Schenectady. Eventually, however, the longest railroad, the B&O, the Baltimore and Ohio, began being used in 1828.
A large building on the waterfront in Albany called the Delaware and Hudson Building is a historic site where trains coming up and down the Mohawk Valley and the Hudson Valley used to have a terminal.
By 1840, the United States had more miles of railroad track than any other country in the world. Since these methods of transportation were used to transport goods, again, as well as people, this period in our country's history is also known as the Market Revolution or the Market Economy period of time.
This is all part of the unit, which is Unit 3 in the curriculum for the New York State History, Government, and Geography Regents.